Three, two, one. We are here today with another episode of the I Love Norfolk show. Today we are in Norfolk with Kate Thomas in the Kate Thomas Art Studio. Is
Yep.
that right? And we're here to tell your story and what kind of got you here. Last time I started with a quote, and I kind of liked that, so I wrote down two of them, much shorter than the last one, so that I don't mess it up. But two of them, one by a guy named Roger Scruton. I don't know if you know who he is, but he has a quote that's called, "If we lose beauty, we lose everything in the meaning of life." And the other one's by Thomas Merton, and art enables us to both find ourselves and lose ourselves at the same time, which I thought were really applicable to what we're going to kind of discuss. So Kate runs an art studio here on Collie. We have some amazing windows here, which I'm sure help with the creation of art and shadows and things
Yes,
like that.
it's great lighting.
So let's just start with that. Go back as far as you want to go. What were maybe some early influences on what got you here today?
Sure, yeah. I was always a very imaginative child, like most artists are. I was really quiet and kind of kept to my own, but really loved any kind of form of creation that I could enter into. I really loved. So was just always drawing as a child. When I was in high school, I got the opportunity to take advanced art classes with this really amazing artist in the area.
Did you have artists in your family that were kind of that you looked up to?
Yes, my grandma, different type of artist, but she drew all the time, but her main thing was that she painted ceramics, and so I'd get to go in her studio, and she, the little eyelashes on the ceramic dolls and all that stuff. And so she was kind of like my person. She gave me my first official drawing lesson, and I can still remember exactly what we drew. And yes, and she's just a really full of life, beautiful person. And so, yeah, I definitely looked up to her a lot. And
I've always found, I have some friends of mine that are very artistic, both in drawing and music and that type of thing. And I feel like sometimes they see things I don't see. Shannon is a good friend of ours. That girl is a master of light and shadow. I follow her Instagram just so I can see her pictures, because I'm like, man, I don't think I would have had the ability to capture that moment of the morning, the light coming in. I heard someone in art mention that most of color is in the shadows. But yeah, it's something. I think there's a book called Drawing from the Right Side of the Brain. I bought it, have not yet used it. But that was something I feel like, when you have someone in your life that can point stuff out that you don't naturally see, it almost opens up a different world to you.
For me, I feel like it's a lot of people have that innately in them where they do see the things, but you feel very different. It feels a little bit isolating to you. So when you find the people that have that, it's that idea of speaking the same truth.
Yeah, you have a tribe.
You get, you find your tribe, you have these connections. But when I teach, the biggest thing I tell my students is, as an artist, your number one thing is you are an observer. Your eyes are your tool. You are there. Your ears are your tool. Whichever way you want to observe and take in the world around you, that's the number one job. And we bring those experiences back
really
to.
Interesting. Do you think that has a tendency? This is just me pontificating. I feel like artists do a better job of slowing down. Because you bring up the observing thing, it's not a rush, right? It's not an ROI. If I have to have 4 hours in this painting, therefore, or it's not a worth my time type thing.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like when time enters into it, you end up feeling like a machine and you're pumping out work. I feel like when I'm on a time crunch, a lot of times my work isn't as genuine. I feel like if we are actively observing, and that includes observing the world around us, but also observing what's happening on the canvas when I'm doing it, observing when I do this or when I mix these colors or whatever, and kind of having this catalog of things that happen, that all gets built up through observation. I feel like things are much more genuine when you take your time and are able to do that and soak those things in.
That's a good point. So Grandma was maybe the first major influence. She's still around, or
she is?
Okay,
she's
cool.
still around. Yeah, she's 91. Nope, she lives up in northern Michigan.
Okay, cool.
But she's still got a ton of energy.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. And was that kind of the first major influence? Were there other people that were big influences on you growing up?
Yeah, so there's a woman in the area. Her name's Lisa Wright. She taught me art through high school, and looking at her work and seeing what she was able to do really kind of blew my mind. It was the first like real artist that I had met and got to see her work and be impacted by it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then in turn she taught, and she taught really well. Like it was a very classical style of learning, like down to the basics, learning about the old masters, like really diving deep into that world.
All right, so rabbit trail. I'm known for these, as Sean knows. So I read a book this last year called Peak by a guy named Anders Ericsson. And I don't know if you ever read Malcolm Gladwell, Blink, that type of thing. So in the book Outliers, he writes about the 10,000 hour rule and how 10,000 hours is kind of the measurement for what it takes to be mastery of something. So Anders Ericsson is actually the guy that he's kind of quoting. And he is a researcher of mastery. You know, what does it take to reach mastery in a field? And it was slightly misquoted. Malcolm Gladwell did not do justice to it, but is a little bit more nuanced there. Of course, that's true with anything. Sure. But it's this idea of purposeful practice. 10,000 hours was kind of the average across all of these professions. But it's this idea of continual practice. And one of the things that in like chess, violin, especially things are very easy to kind of measure. Like, can you play this piece? Right. You know, do you know these moves in chess? When sports, it's like, can you pull off these types of things? There is a follow the path to a certain extent, and then you kind of eventually go off and do your own thing. So this was actually something I wanted kind of to ask you was, you know, you said you followed more of like the classical training, and then I was reading in one of your posts that you were saying that you really struggled with that on your own personal creativity. How do you? So I guess maybe explore that a little bit. What does it mean to you to study the classics or to learn from the masters and then go off and do your own thing? What does that journey look like for you?
Yeah, that was kind of the crux of that journey would have been in college, where you are expected to be able to produce a certain level of technicality, but you're surrounded by all of these art students who have got their own thing going on, and everybody's got their individuality and their, you know, where there's a little bit of competition to be like the most creative or be the look at my idea type thing. Sure. Yeah, while at the same time, it was a very creative community, and I loved my college experience. But that's where it started being like, well, I love painting, drawing, whatever in a technical style. Like I want to do that, but it's not what my heart wants. And so honestly, it felt a little bit like I felt a little bit guilty about leaving it a bit and moving into the abstract world. Yeah. But I think a lot of that was just my own immaturity and other things that I was dealing with in my life at the time.
We all got our stuff. That
yeah, right. And it's coming of age. It's realizing that you can take some of the things that you learned and let them slough off. And,
sure.
Now I am a huge proponent of learn all of the rules.
Yeah.
Then break them however you want. But I do think that those foundational steps are important in taking the time to learn this stuff.
I think there's a lot of wisdom there. It's not like there was the modern movement in architecture, and it was this idea of just throw everything out. Right. And a lot of it produced some really crappy architecture, but in my personal opinion. But it's kind of like, well, so like classical architecture was like, well, there are ratios, right? Like this 1, 3, 5 thing. There's massing rules and scaling rules that are they're not just rules because they're there. There's an old quote says, I think it's a Chinese proverb, says before you tear down a wall, you should ask why it's built. And I think for me, that's kind of, whether it's in any profession, it's like, well, maybe you should kind of understand why the classics said that we should learn these things. Like these are techniques that are important to kind of imbue into yourself before you go off and say, all right, let's just kind of get crazy with it. Which is not a bad thing. Like both the creativity, but also going like, hey, this ratio of like, hey, rooms should be about this amount tall, and the door should be about this amount wide and this amount tall. Why? Because humans are walking through it,
Right.
not four-legged animals.
Right.
And so the ratios exist for a reason. So I think it's an interesting thing, especially maybe even more so in the quote unquote extreme creative world, where it's like, don't put any restrictions on me. So that was, I think I find that interesting in any profession, especially in the creative realm. So high school, your high school art teacher was probably, you said, the most impactful. Went off to college. What was your undergrad in?
Fine art.
Okay. And then what happened after college?
So after college, I got married. Well, I guess technically during college, I got married. And I'm trying to think. Really, after college, I wasn't creating much. I was kind of happy in this newlywed way, and wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I really loved the three-dimensional arts in college. I did a lot of glass blowing and pottery, but felt like there wasn't really an avenue for me to do that outside of school because I didn't have a studio or a hot shop to go to.
Okay.
They didn't have what
Is
they had.
this here or are you? Okay.
Here, but they didn't have what they have now.
Okay.
This was before the Chrysler glass.
Yeah, this was something I learned recently because of what's the hotel, the Glasslight Hotel that just went up.
Yeah.
I'd met with the sales director there. We have one of the largest glass art collections in the world, which I was like, blew me away. I had no idea.
It's pretty incredible. Even the TCC is like, don't quote me on this, but I am pretty sure they're only they're the only community college in the nation that has a glass blowing.
That's pretty cool.
And they're really, I mean, they have a great reputation for their art program over there, especially in the glass
Well, there
world.
you go.
So, yeah. So then, got pregnant with twins.
It happens when you get married. It's
It does.
How it works.
So I had twins, and then 14 months later, had another one. So a little bit crazy. I don't fully remember a lot of that time. Also during that time, which was really difficult, was
It was full of darkness and tears.
and diapers, a lot of
That's
diapers. So also during that time, my dad was diagnosed with a brain tumor.
Okay.
And that was really difficult to be finding myself as a new mom, not knowing how to navigate that, and then also getting this prognosis for my dad that this was a terminal brain tumor. Like, we weren't going to have that long. So a few months after my daughter was born, he passed away, and that was really hard. And I kind of dealt with a lot of depression and anxiety and just trying to figure out what life means. I was still young. I've got this husband and these kids, but part of me just wanted to just be daddy's little girl and not have to deal with real life, but he was gone. So I kept kind of feeling the call to start creating again, but couldn't bring myself to do it. My husband would tell me all the time, like, when like, your partner comes home and maybe one of you is cranky and the other one's like, oh, hey,
yesterday.
Go ahead and eat some food. You need some nourishment so we can like boost your blood sugar. Like for me, creating was that. And so he'd always
Rachel
be like,
told me to go to the gym last night and not come home till I was nice
till you were happy.
Legit, she's like, don't come home till you're nice.
Right.
So I went to the gym and then got some Ben and Jerry's.
Canceled it out. So he kept telling me, like, I just really think you need to be creating, like for your own like mental, emotional health, you need to be creating. So it was kind of on the back burner. And then this high school teacher of mine, she was doing a retrospective show, and part of her retrospective was that she wanted to highlight some of her students in her show.
Okay, very cool.
So she calls me up and she's like, can you do this show with me? And I'm like, ugh.
What a cool vote of confidence.
Yes, totally, definitely. But I literally like hadn't done anything since I was done with college. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. We're gonna do it. So I go down to the Chrysler.
Excitement, tons of anxiety.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like looking for inspiration. I go to the glass wing, and I love Tiffany glass. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna paint a series based off of inspiration from Tiffany. And so I get my canvases, I do it, I hang the show, put myself out there, super nervous, and I sold almost all the pieces that first show, which I was like floored by. And I was like, oh my gosh, like maybe I could actually do this. Like maybe I don't have to, break my bank on art supplies. Maybe I could just start selling and it would just cover enough for me to like be able to keep creating. And so
at the beginning it was probably more, it's like cathartic. It was like this, I need to just kind of express myself and get back into creating so that I can be sane.
Yes. It was like therapy. So that's kind of how it started. And I haven't really stopped since. I just started doing more and more shows and realized that this was turning into a business. And
so I had noticed, especially online, but green, gray, yellow, and blue is a very common thing amongst all of it. And then when I was reading about some of things that inspire you, you said big things, big forces of nature, sky, mountains, the sea, that type of thing. So let's explore that a little bit.
Sure, yeah. It's rare for me to use. Every once in a while I'll pull some pinks and reds out.
Yes, and if it is, it's usually flowers, I've noticed.
It's usually cushioned in a lot of green. Green and blue. Yeah, I mean, that feeling of being a child standing on a shoreline, a powerful shoreline, that I feel like I'm forever trying to capture. It's the same feeling as standing in front of the mountains. I grew up on the shore of Lake Michigan, which I know if you're not familiar with it, it sounds like it's just a lake, but it's as big as it's not as big as the ocean, obviously, but it feels that way. You can't see anything. It's powerful. It's huge. And I also spent some time out in Denver and just like soaking up the mountains and loving it. I feel like I'm always missing those things and always craving those things. There's this idea of the best or the most impressive like creation that we have is this world that we're living in. Yeah. And I have this like really deep longing to just be a part of it. Like I want to be barefoot on the side of a mountain. I want to I want those kind of things. And this is a way for me to interact with that and kind of put my own creation into it, because a lot of my pieces are on that line of abstraction where it's not a literal scene.
Right. I find that for myself very compelling. There's something about one of my favorite philosophers is a guy named Peter Kraft, and that's what he said. He surfs, is being in the surf makes him feel small. He's just kind of like a child playing in the largest pool in the world. And I think there's something like, if you know who Pascal is, he talks about nature is one of the biggest arguments for something beyond us. Is that it's really hard because humans, we want to derive meaning out of things. We always want meaning, and we're one of the, like, dogs don't do this. Like, what's the point behind that, right? At least we don't have any evidence on it that we know of them pondering the meaning of behind stuff. It's very face value. But it's hard not to like look up at the sky and think, wow. Yeah. Because it's, you can walk through the entire day, playing on your phone and going and driving, looking up where we're going. But then when you stop, there's something about like a day at the sea, or I remember laying on a trampoline in Mexico with one of my friends, is a missionary down there, and there's just no lights, and so it's so big, it's almost disorienting. You're like laying down and looking up at the sky, and if you're still enough and sit long enough, you will literally see the whole sky shift, which is just, it makes you feel so small. And you either do one of two things. You look at that and you think, I'm so small and everything's meaningless, or I'm so small and this is so grand, there must be something bigger than me. Yeah. And I think art sometimes, like the Starry Night, right? I think that's one of the reasons those types of things are so popular, is that nature has a way of almost reorienting us towards, I think, good meaning, if that makes any sense. I don't know. Maybe I'm just rambling.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's empowering too. I feel like there's, I don't know, I feel like there's so much energy that comes off of our earth and off of these beautiful places, like internal energy and like emotional energy. And I feel like it's almost...
Most people don't go out into nature and go, oh, I'm so drained.
Right, right.
Oh, that's so taxing.
But there's this thing called grounding where people will go out in their bare feet in the morning and you literally like receive energy from the earth. And we know on a scientific level, like there is energy, there's currents running through our earth. But I think on the more like emotional, mental level, just feeling, I feel like I'm able to like absorb some sort of like empowerment from it, or some sort of, it makes me feel comforted that I get to be a part of something so massive and so beautiful that it's comforting.
No, I totally agree. All right.
Yeah.
So where we're at today is just kind of a continuation of not stopping that path of sort of like the quote, like both finding ourselves and losing ourselves. So we're here on Collie today, and in a really cool spot. And I think North Collie is getting cooler and cooler. Where do you want this to go?
I don't know. I am loving this, and I think at this point my main goal is to make art accessible to people in the area. Through that, kind of educating people on original art a little bit, letting them be able to interact and be self-reflective as they look at art and as they think about putting art in their home or buying things that speak to them. I think just awareness of art in general in the whole area. Like I just want all of that awareness to up itself in the area, because we've got a lot of really great artists here.
I think you should start your own podcast.
I actually have thought about that. I would really love to like talk to other artists in the area.
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll take a quick aside here. Like for me, we talked about this. This project for me is a mixture of, I do genuinely love Norfolk. I've been here for over 15 years when the Navy brought me here, and then I got out, went to ODU while being a stay-at-home dad, and then started my real estate company. And this is a way for me both to explore the city that I love and kind of be present in a non-real estate salesy way.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't see why when I'm planning these out. So what I've done in the past is I'm like, all right, I just want to make sure I'm getting at least one out a month. And we've kind of have hit that. We're 25, cool. We've kind of hit that. I would love personally to do like 48 a year. I'm sure Sean would too, because then he'd get paid more. But yeah, I mean, there's no one around here telling you have to have a certain amount of episodes out. There's no amount of what's the word, production level, I guess, that you have to meet. So why not?
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Well, I was asking, my husband's name is Sean. I was like, have you ever heard, when Lydia told me about it and then you reached out, I was
Lydia
like,
James?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, have you ever heard of the I Love Norfolk podcast? And he was like, oh yeah, totally. I was like, well, what is it? And he's like, well, it's kind of like what you want to do with artists, but he's doing it with others.
So this is really encouraging to me, because I've felt like, like Aaron with the North End Bag Company. I kind of hoped he'd gotten a few more views. He's gotten about 4,000, and he'll probably get another 2 or so over the next couple of weeks. Because personally, I'm like, oh man, as much as I'm doing it for free, I would love for people to get just a ton of exposure.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my hope, that it's
have
more.
Have they posted it? I haven't seen them post it.
Aaron did, both on his personal and the bag.
Okay.
They've posted it. I try to encourage them to share it twice, because the way that Facebook works, unless North End Bag Company is boosting that, Facebook's just pay to play, and so it can be kind of challenging.
Yeah. Well, and they've been like, boosting their Black Friday thing. Like
we'll talk
crazy.
more about. But let's kind of get back on track, because I'm a rabbit trailer. So I had a few things. One, I just find it really interesting. Almost all creatives, for some reason, always include their dog. So Penny,
Yeah.
I did a little deep dive on Instagram. Penny is an occasional star on the Instagram.
Yep.
How long have you had Penny?
We've had Penny for almost 6 years.
She's a cutie.
Thanks.
She's a real cutie. Every now and then I'll be like, oh, there she is. And oh, there she is.
I know there haven't been as many of her lately.
And then here's a slight poke. Your second post on Instagram is a snapshot of you starting your Tumblr page.
It is?
Yes.
I don't think I have a Tumblr page.
October in 12 was you starting a Tumblr page.
Very likely could have been my husband.
There you go.
Starting that. I do not have a Tumblr. Or I guess technically I do. I've never used it.
The only thing I think that I wanted to cover, and I think this was more geared towards anyone, feel free to wax and wane as much as you want on this. I think one of the things that Rachel and I even have struggled with is, so I came out of the military and I had a very masculine-esque job, right? Like I was a door gunner and a rescue swimmer, right? And went to Iraq twice. And then I came home and I was a stay-at-home dad. And it was like identity crisis for me.
Sure.
And I felt really guilty not loving it. And still kind of struggle with some of that sometimes. I feel guilty that I don't love being at home with my kids sometimes. I love creating and doing and like the business piece of me of like, I accomplished this. And so I've always struggled with like the softer, less quantifiable things.
Sure.
Maybe that's why I got an engineering degree. What if you had mentioned, being a mom and, being a mom of 3 within a very, very short period of time. And then also doing this. I think it's probably interesting for the people at home to just hear about like, what have you struggled with and what does that look like for you and your husband?
Yeah. The way that I kind of grew up, and especially through my teenage years, we were very much a part of a community where it was just assumed that you were going to be a wife, you were going to have kids, you were going to homeschool them, and you were going to do things a certain way.
In certain, I think, circles, that's more prevalent than others.
Yes. We were in one that was very prevalent. Like
I think Rachel really struggled. And so one of the things I felt, I'll let you finish because I want to add to that. Keep going. Sorry.
So I was just like, this is not, like, I knew before I even got married, like that was not going to be me. My plans were get married, later in life, maybe have a kid or 2, but then I met my husband and
Sean seduced you.
Fell pretty hard for him.
I'm going to look at this camera because it's a little awkward looking at Sean and Sean's being there. Sean ruined it / made it the best.
Yeah. So, but you meet your person that you're totally in love with, so you go for it. And
it changes everything.
Very glad that I did, but it did change a lot. And so, but he knew that that's not who I was going to be. And so my kids go to public school, and we love it. We love their school. But there is a little bit of this, like, because of the way that I was raised and because I was homeschooled through high school, like, there's this, well, I'm not present enough in their life, or I'm not doing all of the things.
It's a hard thing to deal with.
It is.
So like I was saying, I stayed home for the first kind of 6 years of my kids, as well as doing ODU, and it was challenging. Like my dad in particular did not like that my wife was the breadwinner or the bacon winner, which is more in our house, bacon over bread. Though I love bread. It's an interesting question to ask. Like, what are, especially even today with talking about gender and roles. And one of the things I personally, and I don't mind keeping this in, is I would get really frustrated that my wife was made guilty for not being fully satisfied as a career person. Like Rachel genuinely would have rather been home and been a mom. And I didn't like that a lot of the culture would say, oh, power woman, go out there and be a career. Like, you shouldn't feel guilty. Right. He should feel just as comfortable at home. Like, but that's not how she feels.
Right. And
why should she feel guilty for that?
Right. Because everybody's made different, and everybody has different strengths, and everybody wants,
I'm gonna let that go because it's not that
Yeah.
important. But yeah, I think in general, I think it's an interesting question to ask.
Yeah.
Especially in a world where generally both parents work, in any partnership, right? And figuring out what does that look like for each couple.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy one.
Yeah.
We're gonna do a giveaway, and like what we do every episode. And so Kate has decided to give away one of her original pieces right here. And when you come in, you can buy more than one. That way
That's right.
Because
that's always allowed.
this looks like to me that it should be on the left side of the bed, and you can't have one without the balance of the other.
It's true.
So
True.
if you will like the post and comment below on what is your favorite baby color, and then share it so that we can get Kate as much exposure as possible. You'll be entered in the drawing, and we'll do that here in about a week.
Awesome.
Cool.